So I like to think of a sentence as a complete thought, as you see here. But Beth has already touched on the next one here for what is a paragraph. And I like to think about a paragraph as a collection of thoughts, collection of complete thoughts, sentences. It's an idea or partial idea. Uh, and the way I distinguish between idea and thought here is that an idea is more developed, a little bit more fleshed out than just a single thought. And if you want to play semantics with that, we can. Nice, nerdy conversation. Drop me an email. But with that in mind, I like to get students thinking about what sentences really do. So I often start with a very base sentence like this, and I presented something similar to this at the AP annual conference a couple years back. But a basic sentence. Now, in the chat, y'all, this is where we get to have some fun. In the chat, I want you to write every question you have about this. So what are the who, what, when, where, whys, and hows? You know, what questions are we wondering? Go for it. Which lady, right? Where did she plant them? Good. Who is the lady? What kind of flowers? What flower? Yep. Yeah. How old is the lady? Why is she planting them? What kind of flowers? Yeah. Why again? Yeah. Right. And so what I then try to do once I get students doing this, when is she planting them? Thank you. Once I get students doing this, I say, okay, I want you all to go and write one sentence that answers all of these questions. And of course, they think it's absurd because it's going to be a huge, run on. But I say, let's just do it, and we work and then I have them share that sentence. I said, okay, why did you put this information here and this other piece of information there? And then we start moving things around. How does it matter? How does it matter? How does it affect what we think about the lady or the flowers or the situation if we get details in different places? So you see here, I've got my subject, the lady. I have my verb. In this case, it's a transitive verb. I know that, but my kids don't have to know that. Right? Students don't have to know the names of all of these parts because they know when the thought's incomplete. If I walked up to them and said, the lady planted, we know, planted what? Like, tell me, what did she plant? ... What's there? Our brain knows that thought is incomplete. Just like if somebody walks up to you and says, I was thinking just the other day, and they don't say anything. Well, they didn't come to tell you they were thinking. They came to tell you what they were thinking. So they need to finish that idea, finish that thought. A kid doesn't have to know that, oh, you use the transitive verb there, so you best be able to tell me what the transitive verb is referring to. No, they just know that what is she planting? That's what I want to focus on. All right, so the lady planted, and then we have the direct object. What's she planting? Flowers. All right. So if we think about this sentence, I've got a couple of examples of sentences that answer certain questions. And in these examples, you'll notice that they're the same answers throughout. We've just moved some things around. So here we have, the newest lady hurriedly planted rare tulips on her grave during the last week of October. Now, there's a lot here. If I was teaching a creative writing class, this would be ripe for all kinds of exposition. Okay, and I like what Victoria dropped in here. Wanting to remember the love of her deceased husband, comma, she planted his favorite flowers outside of her bedroom window. Very sweet, Victoria. So, I'm left wondering some interesting things here, but you see, all the parts that relate to one another, I've color coded. So the newest lady, what does that even mean? I don't know, but it's interesting. Hurriedly planted, rare tulips, and then this is green because it's telling me where she hurriedly planted them. Some of you might call this a prepositional phrase, and so on. Well, what's interesting is then you take the same details and move them around like this. So I want you all in the chat to tell me, what do you think is different? Not just that I moved something, like the fact that some of the details are moved around. How do you think that changes what we're being told? Take a moment and look at the two. Beth, you're right, but that's a cop-out answer. Be more specific, please, ma'am. Right on, Victoria. I do the same thing. Yep. So Tracy, it places emphasis on the timing. Ashley, can we take Tracy off of mute so that Tracy can explain to us her answer? I like it, Tracy.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Tracy. Yeah, we sure can. Go for it.
Okay. So by changing that and putting the timing at the very beginning of the sentence, you're taking that is the emphasis there. It was during the last week of October, which is different because tulips are usually tulips are usually grown in the spring and summer. So we're taking that emphasis. It's October, so this is the most important part, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's causing us to focus on a different part of the sentence. Thank you so much, Tracy, for let me pick on you and take you off mute there. Similar thing with this sentence. Hurriedly, during the last week of October, the newest lady planted rare tulips on her grave. I don't know who the her is. Here we're having a little bit more fun, but you notice we're moving around these things, and all of these are modifiers. I'm not requiring kids to know what's an adverb, what's an adjective. I'm not requiring them to know what's a prepositional phrase, a gerund phrase, all those things. I just want them to know what part of the sentence is modifying what other part and what they want to emphasize in their writing. And here's another example of that. So with that, I get students next to start thinking about placement. And the end focus principle, which some of you may have heard of. If you haven't, it's okay. I didn't hear about this until I got later into graduate school and was taking some stylistics courses. It's the idea that it describes a concept that usually, not always, but usually what comes near the end of a sentence is what is the focus of the reader or listener's typo attention. All right. And so with that, I try to get students to look back at those sentences and what are they leaving tagged on the end of it? And most importantly, how does it affect the message or what the writer is trying to develop? And that's right, Beth, a periodic sentence. And that's when I do introduce these concepts to kids: cumulative, periodic, and inverted sentences. So they're looking for where is the main part of the clause. All right. So a periodic sentence is not always, information at the end of a sentence is not always a periodic sentence, but a periodic sentence has the main clause near the end. All right. And so I try to get students to really look at what they've done with this. And then the next step is to get them to transfer it to something they're reading. So here I've dropped in an example from Frankenstein. And I want them to look not only at the entire sentence, but look at the two parts of the sentence separated by the semicolon. Because if a sentence is a complete thought, then a semicolon joins two things that could be separate sentences, it's joining them into a bigger thought, a more complex thought. And so not only are they looking for shifts then in sentences, but they're recognizing that anytime they see a semicolon, it's creating some complexity. There's two bigger thoughts. Sorry, there's two smaller thoughts being combined into one. So we might get them to break it down like this. And I think you all see how this plays out. And then we look at the individual parts. What is being emphasized by holding passions vehement towards the end, what is being emphasized by learning, and not to learn all things indiscriminately at the end, and get the students really talking about the structure of the sentences. And so that's one way to bridge them writing sentences and playing around with the placement of modifiers within a sentence into recognizing how writers do this in their own writing. So they can, when they do a rhetorical analysis or literary analysis, they can look at the sentence level, which is really difficult. Okay.